Welcome everyone as you file in. Thank you so much for your interest today in attending our first Academy of Management Scholars On subject matter expert panel of the 2024 calendar year. So as we get started, I just want to say thank you quickly to our scholar panelists for their time sharing their expert research-based insights on these important topics today. And thank you to everyone viewing live and via recording at a later time. A little bit about the Academy of Management, or AOM, AOM is the preeminent professional association for management and organization scholars. Worldwide members are professors and PhD students in business schools at universities, academics, and related social science and other fields, and also practitioners who value knowledge creation and application. Founded in 1936, AOM features a global community today that is nearly 20,000 strong and spans over 120 countries. Today's panel is titled AOM Scholars On: Steps Organizations Can Take to Create Happier and More Fulfilled Employees. This panel will provide research-based insights addressing recent reports that have found that workers are unhappier at work than they have been in years, noting they are burned out, stressed, and disengaged. So why is this? What can organizations do to create happier employees? Today's panel will endeavor to answer these questions. For attendees, we welcome Q&A throughout the panel, and especially in the latter portion. Simply enter your chat in the Q&A function, and we will answer as many as we can and as appropriate. For media that are viewing live or recorded, thank you for your time and coverage consideration. You can access all AOM research or interview panelists by contacting press@aom.org. Once more, press@aom.org. And without further ado, thank you for your time. And I'll kick it over to today's moderator, Hakan Ocelik of California State University of Sacramento. Hakan, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. Today, we are tackling a billion-dollar question, maybe more, happiness in organizations. And I'm happy to be the moderator today, who will also be providing insight with Simon, Christian, and Bonnie, a fantastic group. We had a great pre-session meeting, a lot of great ideas. I am a professor of management at Sacramento State University with an expertise on emotions, loneliness, and emotional intelligence, and also with a recent interest in exploring the performance dynamics between human intelligence and artificial intelligence in organizations. And so today I'm jumping right into our panel though. So let's start hearing more from our panelists about their research background, and then we'll get to the questions. Simone, you want to get started?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Simone Phipps, and I am a professor of management at Middle Georgia State University, as well as a research fellow at the University of Cambridge, Judge Business School Center for Social Innovation. When it comes to research, I like to explore minorities, whether it's gender, ethnic minorities, to look at their contributions and their struggles in the sphere of management and the society, and to also find solutions to improve the minority experience in business and society. So my research is at the intersection of management history, entrepreneurship, leadership, and social innovation and social sustainability. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Christian?
Yeah, hello. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And thank you so much, Hakan, for the great introduction. My name is Christian Busch. I'm on the faculty of the USC Marshall School of Business, and I'm focusing on purpose-driven leadership, innovation, and serendipity, this active luck that some people seem to have a little bit more than others. And so the question there is, can we create the conditions for more of that serendipity to emerge in order to then have, increased innovation, meaningfulness within organizations, and hopefully also more impact.
Thank you. Bonnie?
Hi. Sorry about that. Hello. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Bonnie Hayden Chang. I am an associate professor of management at the HKU Business School, and that's in Hong Kong. I'm also serving as the MBA program director there. My research is in the area of corporate wellness. I look at bottom-up approaches to helping employees to achieve and also to maintain well-being at work. So that's anything from helping employees to manage their anxiety at work, not just to manage, but also to learn how to leverage and harness that anxiety. helping them to recover from the daily stresses of work and also how to navigate these kind of new work structures where the boundaries of work and life are increasingly blurred. I also look at top-down approaches to making sustained impact by working closely with leadership teams and helping them to create, cultures and workplaces that thrive. What gives me energy is really being able to sit at the intersection of academia and industry. And it's this application of research to making real world impact based on, evidence-based management that gives me real joy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bonnie. So today we'll be looking at two emotions, happiness and unhappiness, but I think we'll do so within the realm of the other emotional aspects of a human being's emotional world. Because not only happiness, we know that anger is increasing, loneliness is increasing, anxiety is increasing, so all these emotions, but at the top of it, we've got unhappiness. So, and recent reports from Gallup and also some other also professional companies are showing that happiness has been to the bottom, and it's been lowest than ever in years, and we are in a post-pandemic society. Things are happening. So from your expertise, though, why do you think this is happening? What is contributing to employee happiness trend that we are experiencing in today's world? And I want to start with Bonnie because I know, Bonnie, you have some statistics to offer us, so we can get started with the numbers maybe and then take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So if we take a look at, if we consider happiness, what organizations kind of operationalize as happiness is employee engagement, right? So if we take a look at, these Gallup findings, these employee engagement surveys from Gallup, 2023, the statistics are that 33% of US employees were engaged. And this is representing a decline in engagement, right? Compared with 36% in 2000 and 40% later that same year. What are they dissatisfied with? Well, US employees feel more detached, right, from their managers as compared with 4 years ago. They also don't feel as connected with the company's purpose or the mission. And they're also just less happy with their company. They're less satisfied. They also feel less likely that someone cares about them as a person at their work. This drop in employee engagement was more severe for younger workers. So that's those that were under 35. And it's also more severe for women. And it's also more severe for people who are working hybrid or who are working fully in office. And this is important, right? Because we know that employee engagement is linked to many performance outcomes in organizations, right? Disengagement costs about 1.9 trillion US dollars in lost productivity. So again, I think just going back to your question about what contributed to this, I think we have to start from the top, right? We've been facing a persistent crisis in leadership. The World Economic Forum has released a report in 2015 saying that 86% of respondents believe the world is experiencing a leadership crisis. And when we look at things that indicate this, for example, the latest statistics on trust, right, the 2023 Edelman Trust Barometer indicates that globally, trust in CEOs is at 48%. To me, that represents distrust as a baseline, right? So I think the pandemic has, really spurred or at least amplified kind of this movement around the quote unquote great resignation, where employees are no longer willing to put up with toxic workplaces or toxic cultures. And if they're not leaving their jobs altogether, they're quiet quitting, right? And now thinking about the new generation of talent who have no qualms about changing their jobs if they don't feel connected or if they don't feel the work gives them purpose or meaning. I think that starts to get at contributing factors.
And the fact that females and younger people are getting a larger share is really concerning, which indicates that or suggests that there might be a happiness gap in the workforce. As much as many people are getting unhappy, some of them getting unhappy, more unhappy than others. Simone, what are your insights?
Yes, Bonnie made a very good point about leadership and culture. And it's really important for the leaders to recognize what employees need. And they have to show that they care about what employees need. And there are a number of things that employees really care about, that they feel like they would be happier in an employee-employer relationship if these needs were addressed. Some of them include autonomy, flexibility, and work-life integration. Competent employees want to be able to make decisions, to have that freedom, that decision latitude, to show their competence. They don't want to be micromanaged. And that also signals that there's trust there in that employee-employer relationship. And Bonnie mentioned that important aspect as well. In terms of flexibility, employees also need to have that flexibility. And the pandemic and the Great Resignation highlighted this need for flexibility as well. Employees want to be able to integrate other things into their lives that are important and not just work. And so a lot of times we hear the term work-life balance. A lot of scholars now are shifting to the term work-life integration, because work-life balance has shown to be really elusive, a very elusive goal. You can't really find a true balance between your work and your life. So you have to try to, as seamlessly as possible, integrate your life into your work. And leaders that acknowledge this and recognize that this is important to employees are going to be able to show better that they care about their employees, and employees are going to appreciate that more. So this attention to work-life integration, giving support to employees as they need it, making sure employees have that voice and able to share what they need, and then leaders actually enacting practices and policies to show that they are listening, actively listening, and not just saying, you know, we want to hear from you. That shows that you care as well. So that is going to actually contribute to the happiness rather than the unhappiness in the workplace, when leaders cultivate a culture where they show that they care about their employees.
And I like all these indicators because they reflect that now we are treating human being as a more complex phenomena as what we were been doing in 1950s and 60s.
Definitely.
We move beyond job satisfaction. It's not just salary and a decent work environment anymore. People want something deeper than that from their work. And I know, Christian, you have a lot to say about authenticity aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And building on Simon's and Bonnie's great comments, I think in our research, we've seen three key themes. One is the idea of potentiality, in terms of people are increasingly aware of how life could be in different scenarios. And so once you become aware of that, you're not able anymore to just settle with that one aspect that you have. You're kind of like, no, I want more now. And I found it fascinating, you know, as someone who had 2 near-death experiences by now, I looked at COVID very much as a kind of collective near-death experience, in terms of when you face how quickly something in life can change and how quickly you realize that nothing can be taken for granted anymore, that then actually you try to find an anchor. And I think a lot of people try to find that anchor, and they look to their organizations as an anchor, and they didn't find it there. And I think that kind of like, in a way, is then the disillusion that potentiality might not be in the current setting that you're in, and then you're looking elsewhere. The second is really around, I think Bonnie already pointed to that kind of connection. I found that fascinating, that in one hand, we live in the most interconnected world we've ever been in terms of technology and in terms of ability to just connect, right? Zoom is our personal private plane. I'm in your living rooms now, right? And at the same time, there's this loneliness epidemic where people feel extremely lonely, extremely isolated, and to Simon's point, where they feel they don't necessarily have a voice, especially in organizations. And so as a leader, then kind of the ability to create the glue again, and to create the glue, especially when people are in remote settings, is obviously a key leadership skill. And then third, and I think, Hakan, to your point, the really important theme around meaningfulness, what feels that is authentic to me and the organization, and that is aligned. Because, you know, before the pandemic, there was a lot of talk around purpose and things like this. And then during the pandemic, you could see, you know, that the wheat was kind of like separated from the chaff, in terms of those people who really believed in it and who really kind of said, okay, we cut top management salaries in order to keep our low-level employees, right? Those kind of things which show that you truly believed in the purpose talk, versus people who just kind of did the let's fire people and then hire them again once the crisis is over. And so I think Hubert Joly always said it beautifully, this idea that the unexpected really brings out who you really are. And I think that's kind of what we've seen during that crises and other crises that we've had over the last years, the permanent crises that in a way, a lot of the leaders might not be as strong as we thought they were in terms of really being authentic in their leadership. And so I think that's something we'll probably explore how organizations can go about that.
Yes, and crisis research shows that crises accelerate change for about 20 years. So we might all of a sudden find ourselves in a place where we would have been 20 years later when it comes to work-life balance, working from home, even artificial intelligence, I would say, and all kinds of new changes that were in the midst of it. And also the contrast, Christian, that you mentioned, that during the pandemic, I think a lot of companies and leaders showed how far they can go to help their employees. And that raised the expectations. And some companies, organizations took it from there in a post-pandemic world, and some regressed. And I think the expectations component of it really triggered all the employees, especially those who are not getting their share of happiness right now, that they can see alternatives are possible. And I think that's where you feel more unhappy. Otherwise, you would just accept it as a reality, but knowing that alternatives are possible. And I think that leads to a workforce that's now angrier, more stressed, more disengaged than ever, but it speaks to the bottom line too, because these trends steadily are declining, and it costs the global economy 8.8 trillion in lost productivity, is reported by the media and the leading research institutions. So then the question is, what can employers do to make workers happy and support their needs? And what are the long-lasting implications if this concerning trajectory continues? And I want to start with Simone this time.
Sure. And what can employers do? That employers can do a lot. And so I want to focus on this from the aspect of sustainability, striving to achieve sustainability in organizations, to have work that's sustainable. And if you're familiar with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them, but I'm going to focus on 2 of them, which have a lot of overlap in my opinion, and that's decent work and attention to health and well-being. When we think about decent work, a lot of times people go straight to the pay. And yes, there is an economic aspect of decent work, but it's not just about money. It's about safety at work. It's about security at work. It's about dignity. It's about respect. So all of those things fall under the umbrella of decent work. And if you have decent work, then you're more likely to have employees that have their health and well-being maintained. So there is a lot of overlap there. And so well-being in itself is under the umbrella of health. If your whole self is healthy, then you're more likely to have well-being. So there's the physical aspect, but there's also the mental aspect, the emotional aspect. And so organizations have to pay attention to that. When it comes to well-being, it can be manageable workloads, resources to help with workloads because they are getting heavier and heavier, support in the organization, decision latitude, as I mentioned, again, because employees want that autonomy at work, the ability to rise in their work, to be promoted, to have more responsibility. So all of those things are important, and employers, if they're looking at sustainability and they're focusing on providing decent work and health and well-being, culture is really important. And so there are 3 aspects of culture that have shown to really help with these 2 sustainable goals. That's people orientation, adaptability, and a cooperative kind of culture. And so if you are people oriented, then you care about your people's needs, what they want. You learn to adapt, that adaptability part. You shift according to the shifting times and the shifting needs of your employees. And of course, cooperation, that idea of listening to what your employees need and then responding, being responsive to their needs. So showing that kind of care for them and trying to build a consensus among your employees. And so employers need to be able to nurture that kind of culture that shows that they're people-oriented, that they're willing to adapt to the needs of employees, and that they want to have that cooperative side of relationship with employees. And if they do that, then they're going to focus more on addressing the decent work and the health and well-being of employees. And long-term implications are vast. You have outcomes for employee at the employee level and at the organizational level, positive outcomes like employee commitment, increase in satisfaction, motivation, increase in employee resilience, and increase in performance. So employee performance, organizational performance, and a lot of different sub-dimensions of performance, including organizational citizenship behaviors, etc. So the long-term implications only help the organization when they focus on those things.
So what I'm hearing is kind of a two-component thing. One is this almost ongoing emotional intelligence efforts. You have to be emotionally intelligent on a daily basis, because as we already, I think, all agreed on, employees are want to be treated as complete human beings, not just wage earners anymore. They've got their life invested in their organizations and professions. So in addition to the skills, though, there's also an intention component, like how well intentioned you are, so you make it sustainable. And Bonnie, I know you wrote a book, and especially with regards to the intention component, there's a key word there. I think that's really important, which is kindness. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, oh, thank you for the setup, Hakan. I'm going to start by talking about the long-lasting implications, but from the flip side of what Simone talked about. If we continue along the trajectory of, where we're going, not only do we have a workforce that's, engaging in quiet quitting, right, that we mentioned earlier, but they're engaging in loud quitting or actually quitting, right? We've got a workforce that's running on stress, that's running on empty. And that's just not sustainable, right? You've got managers who are operating from stress, trying to lead an anxious team when they're anxious themselves. You've got a team that's, firing on all cylinders, trying to keep up when they're burned out or they're checked out. And that leads to careless mistakes, that leads to blaming and shaming. And it's just not a pleasant or collaborative environment. And then all of that, then contributes to mental health challenges, right? The mental health degradation of an entire workforce in terms of the mental health challenges that we're seeing already, right? The anxiety, the depression, the burnout, which affects and is affected by physical health. And all of this kind of, accumulates and manifests as absenteeism, presenteeism, and that affects productivity and performance and citizenship. Not to mention all of the increased the healthcare costs, right? It's all this one vicious cycle. So the actionable pieces, what employers can do, which you just mentioned, Hakan, I just published a book with Penguin Random House around kindness and leadership called The Return on Kindness, or the ROK. And that's just a play on the ROI of kind leadership. And that really ties into our discussion here, because we've been seeing this shift, right, following, even corporate recognition by and large of the unsustainable nature of leadership in its current form. We've also seen increased calls for, the humanity of leadership, or authentic leadership, or ethical leadership, or any number of labels that we've seen for this, but we're just not seeing any real change. And so this book really just, cuts across what essentially has become buzzwords for organizations and gets down to the fundamentals, which is about kindness. And so in this book, I unpack a RISE model to help leaders rise to kind leadership. And it reflects 4 actionable behaviors that really touch on what Simone mentioned, right? So the R is really about role modeling the behaviors that you want to see from your people, right? And this doesn't just include things like, vulnerability and DE&I, but it's also about role modeling the importance of taking breaks, right? The importance of recovery, of switching off. The I in RISE is about intentional flexibility. So this piece is about recognizing that everyone is struggling with something. Everyone is struggling at different times and in different ways. And so as leaders, we need to learn how to be flexible. The S in RISE is about supportive action. And again, that touches on what Simone mentioned before, that support piece, right? kind leadership is manifested in action. So it's asking, as an employer, what's one thing that I can do today, right, to take away the stress or the burden of my people? And there's just an infinite number of things, or an infinite number of ways that employers can do this for their people. And then finally, the E of RISE is about energize and equip. Why energy? Because energy drives action, right? It's a verb. It motivates you to action. And since one of the main contributors of unhappiness in the workplace is, Simone mentioned, is around lack of clarity or a lack of resource, lack of tools to do one's job. That's where the equip comes from. So it's really about arming people with the tools and the strategies to even get their work done.
And I think this brings us to this holy grail, almost essence of this phenomenon we are talking about, which is happiness. You cannot automate happiness. And I like the word buzzword there, and I would also add buzz actions. Let's say a company is giving holiday basket every year. And if I get that every year, after a couple of years, I take it for granted, and I become unhappy when I don't get it, but I don't really feel happy when I get it. So happiness is an emotion that comes and goes. And I think for centuries, we couldn't really tackle it. We don't know how it happens, simply because there's an error term in there, or randomness. And Christian, I would love to hear your phenomenal research about serendipity, and how can we integrate serendipity in those efforts that Simone and Bonnie are pointing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with Bonnie in terms of, I think, look, if you take a step back and think about, why do we have organizations in the first place, right? We kind of got into this whole shareholder capitalism and everything else, but in the very first place, organizations were essentially there to bring people together, to somehow kind of make a living, but also to have some sort of family, some sort of kind of environment that makes you feel that you're part of a collective. And I think that's kind of really interesting, because when I think about the levers that we have to create organizations that feel more meaningful to people, but also that create that kind of serendipity that then, leads to innovation, impact, and people feeling more joyful, I think there's kind of three levers to it. One is the mindset piece, in terms of how do we work with people, treat them seriously, but also kind of develop on this. And Hakan, to your question, I'm a big fan of especially CEOs who are very good at combining an openness to the unexpected with having a clear sense of direction. So we did a study, for example, with over 40 leading CEOs of companies, large companies. And one of the key themes that came out of it that makes those leaders particularly successful is that they are extremely good at saying, Ajay Banga at MasterCard back in the days, he would say, I want to get 500 million people into the financial sector who were previously unbanked. So these were people who didn't have access to resources and so on. And so it felt like there's this constraint. And he said, that is our North Star, is to get those 500 million people into the financial system. Here's our strategy. Here's our plan. But I'm telling you already now that if Hilda in Cape Town tells us that this strategy doesn't work with her, we will adjust the strategy, and that is part of our plan. And so what he's doing here is he's moving away from this illusion of control, the kind of illusion of certainty, this kind of idea that people always feel they have to pretend that they know everything, to no, I can't give you certainty, but I can give you clarity. And I think that's the big shift that we're seeing with purpose-driven leaders who are really kind of in real control, is that they say goodbye to wanting to control everything, but rather saying, I give you a North Star where we're going, I give you a strategy, but I also want you to be prepared for the unexpected, and I give you the power to cope with that. And I think that's kind of like linked to the second piece, which I think especially blue collar workers, I'm always baffled when I go to companies. I do a lot of work with companies where I go in and I try to understand the culture. And when I see how they treat, those people who they perceive as not as important, right? Maybe the cleaner, maybe the receptionist and others. I mean, those people can be the joy multipliers, right? When you have the first person I meet when I come to a company is the receptionist, and then I bump into a cleaner, right? And so the thing is that if you give those people clearer career trajectories, that they feel valued, that they feel they can actually move up, if you take those people more seriously, treat them with more respect, I think there's much more you can do in terms of culture than just kind of incentivizing the top breed of the company. So second is really around how do we focus a bit more on especially blue collar workers, because they are at the core of everything we do. And then third aspect really is to that question of, we raised it earlier, right? What is the alignment between what an organization and their leaders say and what they actually do, right? A lot of times, like, companies have these beautiful value statements on the homepage, but then you go into the office on Monday morning as an employee and you don't feel it. You don't feel that that's there, or you come on Zoom and you don't feel it's on Zoom, right? And so there I've seen companies that are doing really well. What they do is they say, okay, if I have a value here, if a value is curiosity or kindness or whatever the value is, what is the action within the company that I support now with processes, structures, you know, or simple interactions? Like in the weekly meeting, if our value is curiosity, then in the weekly meeting, we should ask each other, what surprised you last week, right? Very simple things, but if you do that, then essentially you're ingraining values within an organization. And I think as organizations scale, that becomes more and more difficult. And so doing that on the team level and getting team leaders to really buy into that, becoming a really interesting opportunity. And I think that's kind of why I'm very optimistic about where the world is going, that I think there are fantastic examples of leaders who do that. And it's, I think, more about disseminating that to others.
And your results regarding respect, we have some results also that resonates with that during the pandemic. Right before the pandemic, we were about to do a study on loneliness, and then pandemic started, so we put a pause on it. And then about 3-4 months later, after full staff quarantining, we surveyed employees in a city where some employees completely work from home for the first time in their lives. They were all self-quarantining. And then we got employees who were working on site as essentials full-time, and then we got hybrids. And the big question was, who was lonelier? And the results showed it didn't matter. It didn't matter where you worked, but what did matter was those who felt on the sides felt a lot less respected as compared to the other groups. And that was a surprising finding, because the organization was thinking that you are our heroes. And they genuinely believed that those essentials were their heroes. But the essentials thought that we are like the foster kids here. Nobody takes care of us. And why are we even doing this? So you never know the human psychology again, and the happiness and where it goes. So which brings in this big challenge that all the organizations are facing right now, that you don't have an automated cookie-cutter solution to make people happy. So you need some innovative approach. So what kind of top innovations do we have right now, or would you suggest that we can bring in more systematic, more, I would say at least high, possibly successful attempts to increase employee happiness? Now, Christian, I want to start from you so we can go in the reverse order. Maybe we can tie it to serendipity first.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, it really builds on what we talked about earlier. The first one being really around how do we make sure that we develop structures, processes, but also the kind of activities that allow people to truly be seen. And, you know, to me, that's about in the weekly or monthly newsletter, not only celebrating people who sold more stuff, but also people who lived the values, or people who really represented, right? If one value is curiosity and related to innovation, then let's celebrate examples of this, and let's really like make people see concrete manifestations of how that is possible. And I think, you know, I've always learned a lot, especially from people in extreme tough contexts. So a lot of our research is in base of the pyramid context, so poorest of the poor. And I'm always fascinated by how innovative, how creative people are in contexts where out of necessity, they have to be very engaged and create interesting new things. And so one organization I'm a huge fan of is called Reconstructed Living Labs. And so what they do is, it's in the Cape Flats in Cape Town, an organization that offers low-cost education approaches. So it's things like 10 steps to use social media to build your business, very simple steps. And then they go into local communities. And instead of saying, oh, what do people need here, and really focusing on resources, they say, what's already here and how can we make the best out of it? So they look at a former drug dealer, they say, fantastic. That person will have a lot of social capital. That person will be very resourceful. And if we can turn them into a teacher, now it's cool to be a teacher. And now we can turn a community around doing that. And so what I'm saying here is that I think understanding the levers of what gets people engaged, what is kind of, who's the cool kid? Who are the people who are the most connected? Can we make them not only talk about, you know, the chit-chat gossiping, but also about things that the organization cares about, and really kind of identify those multipliers. But also then can we bring in the dignity to people? And our labs is a fascinating example you have to imagine completely crime-ridden community where they say, when you come in as a person in absolute poverty, you get a fresh cup of coffee. Why? Because here you don't get respect by having a gun, right? Which is outside the case. Here you get respect because you're a human who wants to learn. And here is the sign that we respect you, which is a fresh coffee. And so I think sometimes it's so simple how you get people feel valued and seen. But a lot of organizations kind of think, oh, this is a given, and like you just kind of like, you know, here's a what is it, like a tennis table and like, or a table tennis table, and they can play on their own and whatever. It's absolutely not about that, right? It's about like in the morning maybe saying hello and like going to them and saying, hey, do you have any new ideas and things like that. And so Hakan, that comes to your point, like how does innovation happen? Through serendipity a lot of times. It comes through actually communicating with people and just asking them simple things, right? Like, oh, what surprised you last week? Or did you see something unexpected? And I'll close on my favorite example in that regard, which is the potato washing machine. And so the potato washing machine is essentially, a couple of years ago, a big company in China called Haier. They produce washing machines, refrigerators, and so on. And they received calls from farmers. And the farmers told them, your crappy washing machine is always breaking down. Why is the washing machine breaking down? Well, we're trying to wash our potatoes in it, and it doesn't seem to work. Now, what would we usually do? We would probably say, that's not in our marketing plan. Our marketing plan says that you should wash your clothes in this, so your warranty will be gone, right? What did they do? Exactly the opposite. They said, you know what, that's unexpected, but there's probably a lot of people in China and in the world who are farmers who want to wash their potatoes. So why don't we build in a dirt filter and make it a potato washing machine? That's how the potato washing machine became one of their products. But in order to know that, you have to actually ask the person, right? The salesperson in this case, but it might be the cleaner who perceives that a person is unhappy the whole day, and maybe they can tell you that they were surprised that they weren't taken care of, or whatever it is. But as soon as we engage with people and ask them questions, we'll be surprised how the most unexpected of corners become the most amazing of ideas. And I do think that comes to understanding that everyone within the organization has an immense value, but a lot of times we don't really see that value. And so that's kind of the lost potentiality, you know, the biggest cemetery in the world, which is the cemetery of ideas that never happened because we didn't listen to people.
Simone?
Yes, I really love that example that Christian gave with the potato washing machine. And he also mentioned this idea of making people feel seen. And I just wanted to add on to that. One way to show that your employees are seen and they are heard is when you ask them the questions, as Christian said, and you engage with them, that you have to actually show that you're trying to address their needs. And so I just wanted to go back to one of those needs that I mentioned earlier, which is the need for flexibility and work-life integration, because that has shown to be a serious priority among working employees, especially working mothers, and of course working fathers too. You know, a lot of times we assume that women take on the role of caregivers and not the fathers, but there are fathers who are also caregivers, and they want to have that kind of acknowledgement as well, and to have their needs met. And so something that's really important is having initiatives in a company that allows those priorities to be met. And so one of the initiatives that is, well, sometimes we see it as innovative because not all companies do it, but some companies do. And that's alternative work arrangements, whether it's flex time or telecommuting or job sharing, whatever it is, that can help allay some of the stress, relieve some of the stress of working parents and people who have to take care of others. And so is something, a company that I ran across, it was Ali, which is an IT services company, and they provide remote work and flex time that employees really appreciate. And also Sodexo, which is a food and facilities management company. They have this initiative called the FLOW initiative, and what it stands for is flexibility optimizes work, the FLOW initiative. And it allows employees to adjust their schedule, their location, and their manner of work that's going to allow them to get things done as they need to get them done, as long as the work gets done as well. And so, for example, if you have an employee who has to drive to work 2 hours, but you allow them to engage in telecommuting where they can take that 2-hour drive time and can sit in their home office, that actually helps the organization. It helps the employee as well as the organization, because then they're more productive. Because instead of being on the road in a car just driving for 2 hours, that's 2 hours of work they're getting done for their company. So something as simple as that, allowing those alternative work arrangements, allowing employees to have that flexibility so that they can integrate their lives into their work and also get the job done for you as best as possible, as best as they can. That is very useful and very appreciated among employees.
And when I know you got this macro level kindness approach also, like culture of kindness, you want to add on to that? Or other innovative approaches that we are seeing today?
I really liked actually listening to Christian and Simone, and it felt like I was an attendee rather than part of the panel. I wanted to add, we're seeing more of a growing trend in organizations to kind of hire for happiness, right? So you're seeing positions where, the JD is about creating happiness, positions such as the chief happiness officer or a chief purpose officer. And I think all of this is really about, crafting cultures that are grounded on core values that are kind of brought forward by an alignment in action, right? And I think Christian touched on this earlier. It's around starting top down, yes, but it's also, a thread that kind of weaves its way, out and across the organization. And I'll go back to kindness here. This really is an opportunity to kind of intentionally design for kind cultures. And let's make no mistake about it, right? This is a direct rebuff to traditional leadership models that were predicated on fear, on stress and control, which has contributed to the state that we're in today. So what can organizations do, right? What does this shift look like? It looks like, again, Christian mentioned this, it's around holding company-wide discussion around how kindness might reflect a core company value. And it's not just staying in the abstract, right? It's not just about having it on the company walls or in a company website. It's really working through specific behaviors that's representative of what your company considers to be kind behaviors, and also by extension, what your company considers to be unkind behaviors, right? And this can be done at the top management level, and it should be done at the senior leadership level, but it can also be done at the department level. It can even be done at the team level, right? So when a company does this and are having these conversations and building out, a language around kindness, then you can, really think about how kind leadership, right, or kindness in a company can be rewarded, right? What are the policies around this? And also, how are we going to sanction, even penalize, right, unkind actions? Why? Because the kindness maturity of an organization will not sacrifice a culture, right, that's based on kindness. So when kindness is a core company value, and when leaders role model kindness, and when kindness is rewarded, then kindness becomes contagious and kindness becomes the cultural norm.
I love the structural approach. It's just because kindness is a concept that's so valuable, but also can easily become a buzzword. But the way you are describing it is you can actually walk the talk by setting the norms, creating even sanctions and rewarding, and then creating a culture of kindness. And I think there are some companies who have actually started doing that. So we are getting closer to the Q&A session, but before we get there, I want to get one punchline from each panelist today, starting with Simone. If you could provide one piece of advice for management scholars and practitioners regarding employee engagement and development strategies in today's workplace, what would that be?
My piece of advice would be to strive to have a cooperative culture, because that idea of cooperation embraces so much of all we've been talking about. If we cooperate more, leaders cooperate with each other and cooperate with employees, then they will be able to show that kindness more, as Bonnie was talking about. Because when we think about cooperation, my research partner and I, we talk about this concept of a cooperative advantage and trying to strive to achieve a cooperative advantage. So you're showing that spirit of care and community. You engaging in dialogue, and you have to strive to build consensus among other people, stakeholders, whether it's employees, community at large. And so when you strive for that cooperation, if you really listen to people and show you responsive to their needs, that's showing kindness. And also what Christian is talking about that, achievement of serendipity, that good luck, good fortune, is sometimes the way to get that good fortune that you're trying to achieve is just by cooperating with other people. And when you work together and you try to make sure that everyone feels heard and that everyone's needs are addressed, then things fall into place and you're able to achieve what you're trying to work for as well. So I think that that idea of cooperation is really important, and it also embraces that people orientation and that adaptability that I talked about previously. So cooperation, I would say, would be my final thought.
Christian?
I feel so. I completely agree with Simone. I can't leave this conversation. I feel with so I grew up in Heidelberg, and Goethe wrote a lot of his poems there. And he had this beautiful idea that if you take someone as they are, you make them worse. But if you take them as what they could be, you make them capable of becoming what they can be. And to me, that's always been about potentiality, in terms of that if we just see a situation as it is, right? The world is hard. A lot of people behave sometimes not, in the best way they could and things like that. But as a leader, our responsibility is to create the conditions for people to live up to their potential, to live up to what could be. And, that's kind of what I find so fascinating when you look at leaders and how they behave. I think you very quickly see who of them allows that kind of people truly, become who they can become because they give them the tools to make that happen. And it's really simple things. So one that I've always found very useful is really that I learned from that R Labs, Reconstructed Living Labs, that idea of not only thinking about how can I help that person with resources and everything else, but really what is their superpower and how can I help them develop their superpower and not kind of put them into any kind of boxes. And it's amazing how then people, who thought they would be really good in one thing actually kind of become really good at other things. And so I think our role as leaders is to really identify potentiality and then create the conditions for that potentiality to flourish.
Bonnie?
Oh yeah, all really good points here. I guess I have to end on kindness. Kindness matters. It's very simple. We talked about, these simple concepts, but it's just, there's such surprisingly big returns. And when we think about kind leadership, right, it makes all the difference to your people. And I think the point really is, you're not sacrificing anything here. You're actually expanding the pie, because it doesn't mean that you can't be an effective leader, which I think a lot of people have this kind of misperception that a kind leader is a weak leader. And then the best part about kindness is that it costs nothing. So that would be my final message.
I can't think of a better final message than this, in line with happiness. Okay, so now you got some great questions too, and so we are going to shift to that. And I want to start with one question. Employee satisfaction could be adversely affected by also the macro environment, the political environment, and COVID, and we have seen that. So, for instance, well-being in Hong Kong is affected, especially in time of social movements. To what extent would political environment affect employee well-being? How organization would offer supports to employees in response to their dissatisfaction coming from the political environment? So, because we want to think that organizations actually provide all the happiness, but if it's happening in a macrocosm, in an environment where things are really falling apart, what can organizations do to help employees? And anybody can jump in.
Okay, well, that's a challenging one, especially when you're bringing in the aspect of the macro environment that relates to politics. And you know, in some organizations, they try to shy away from what's going on in the political environment. And so one thing that organizations can do is that they can provide a listening ear, and they can provide an open environment for dialogue, which is part of the idea of cooperation and making sure you show that care and community. And so I remember, for example, at my university, we engaged in something called bold dialogue when we had a lot of issues with diversity, equity, inclusion before those were buzzwords that were unacceptable in some areas. And so people were able to just come freely and talk about what was bothering them, talk about the challenges that they faced, etc. And it was an open environment where everyone could come and they can express their views, they can vent, and then they can have also resources that they may need, whether it, you know, you need to speak to someone in terms of counseling, etc. And I think that all organizations could provide that sort of open environment where people can feel comfortable to share their experiences and share what challenges they may have, and whatever resources organizations can provide that would be relevant to their needs that can be afforded. And so, of course, organizations differ in terms of the money they have to provide certain resources, but within the resources of the company. So some companies, they offer counseling, they offer other benefits like that. And I think that that is going to be helpful for something like that.
And I want to add quickly to that, those crises also might be more subtle, which is happening right now in California. Recently, I was invited by San Mateo Board of Division, Board of Directors, and then the county declared loneliness as a social health crisis in San Mateo County, which is a sister county to Silicon Valley. So loneliness is in abundance right now in California, and Daly City actually a week later declared again with a resolution loneliness as a social health crisis. In the midst of all that, organizations can create these microcosms that they can nourish people and maybe buffer themselves a little bit from this big loneliness waves. At least they can feel connected at the organization level. So that's what I would want to chip in. Anybody else, Christian? I think you have something to that.
Yeah, building on this, I think you hit the nail on the head, Simon and Hakan, in terms of that at the end of the day, when you look at what makes a really good organization is a really good community, right? It's a really good place, a cocoon for people to feel, oh, this is my people. And I think, you know, I can only speak more broadly about adverse conditions, right? So a lot of our research is in conditions where there's really tough macroeconomic conditions, very tough kind of social conditions. And what I've seen is that especially in those conditions, an organization can really distinguish itself by being that kind of place where people feel psychologically safe, where they feel that they can really arrive and feel, okay, the world here is still a little bit better than it's out there. And so I'm a big fan, and if you're interested in this, to really think about community building. So there's, for example, a great, it's called Community Canvas. So if you Google Fabian Fortmüller Community Canvas, they developed, you know how there's the business model canvas for this is how you build a business, and then there's the community canvas for this is how you think about community, this is how you think about the boundaries of community, how you create a community where people feel the sense of belonging. And I think that comes to exactly Hakan's point. If you can create a community that develops that sense of belonging, it makes it a little bit, it's never, again, I think that's why I think those kind of answers will never do justice to the enormity of the question, right? But I think if there's kind of micro ways that we can take, it's probably within those community building things that help people feel a sense of belonging, and that they are anchored within that.
Bonnie, do you have anything to offer?
Yeah, just quickly highlighting, bringing some points forward that Simone and Christian already mentioned is around, you know, as an organization, companies can really do a lot in terms of creating a safe space for people to voice, but it's really about, you know, offering a shelter or a protection for their people so that no matter what's happening out there, we know that there's always going to be external threats, whether it's, you know, political uncertainty or, you know, a pandemic, whatever it is that's, you know, external to our company. we know that we can face all of these things together. And whether that's, offering, learning circles or listening circles, or, bringing all of these points that Simone and Christian mentioned, we can kind of fight all of this together as a collective.
So instead of seeing organizations as our potential, enemy or something that we fight with, organizations can become our microcosms where we can enjoy our psychological safety. So we can, and actually wasn't that the reason why organizations were created for, right? Like we created organizations so we can cope with our environment in more effective ways. And yet maybe over time we created so much dynamics in organizations that they in themselves started becoming challenges for us, which I think is a reflection of what's happening right now, that people seem to like their organizations less. So I think it's this maybe historical time that we should redefine our relationship with our organizations, because I think we got a lot to benefit from them, and we created them. Why not just keep using them, right? Or utilizing them as much as we can. So I don't know how much time we have. I think we are getting close to the end. But I'm going to turn to Michael. Are we done, or do you want us to continue? We can continue for 1 more hour.
I think we're at time. So I just want to reiterate, thank you to our wonderful panelists for that research and insight-based conversation that was extremely stimulating. And for all viewers live and recording, please stay on the lookout on AOM's YouTube channel for this recording to be uploaded over the coming days. And also for any media watching now or recorded, please reach out to press@aom.org. And we're happy to connect you with these wonderful panelists and also with broader AOM resources to inform your reporting. So great. Thank you, Hakan. Thank you, all panelists. Until next time for the Q2 panel, have a great day. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great
Thanks,
day.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.